delighted that you're with us. And I'm not sure what's happening for Jeanie. She must have some difficulty getting on. So we are celebrating Memorial Day as usual today. Once again, we'll be doing that for the rest of eternity as we step into the world of forgiveness. And the whole idea of our Memorial Day celebration is to remove from the mind of the person experiencing some form of hostility or fear, whatever that hostility or fear is. Is that you that I hear there, Jeanie?
It is, and I am not sure what's going on with Foxfire, but that's where I usually sign on to the radio show, and Foxfire says that it can't find Blog Talk Radio, so it won't even let me do anything. So I've had to go in through another browser, and it's running really slow, but I'm on here. So welcome to the show. Yeah.
Okay, well, just go ahead and do the opener.
All right, well, welcome to Mind Shifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. If you're trying to get into the chat room and you weren't able to, what happens is if the host isn't on there yet, you can't get in, so do a refresh. That will bring it back up, and you should be able to get in there now because it is on. And we're glad you're with us on the show. Our call-in number is 646-200-4169. And today I heard Michael already talking about our Memorial Day celebration, and I don't have that up on my screen yet, but it's like day 265 or something like that. So welcome to the show. We're glad you're here. We already have several people on the switchboard. Sam said she was going to call in, so we'll have her here in a few minutes. And now I've got it up. It's day 263.
Awesome. Well, our work together in this radio show, Mind Shifters Radio, is about shifting the mind of the person who would happen to be in any form of hostility or fear, out of hostility or fear back to our original essence as human beings. And our definition of a human life is not a word definition because there's no way you can describe that, but it is rather simply the active presence of love. If you hold a newborn, you know exactly what a human life is. And our measure for behavior is if you can't imagine a newborn doing it, then probably you want to think twice before you engage in that type of behavior, whatever it is. And our conversation about Memorial Day is the holding this space where we can let loose of this hostility and fear that we've been structured with, most of us, all our lives, and removing that, letting loose of that. The letting loose of hostility and fear is called forgiveness. And forgiveness has been taught by our culture as letting somebody else off the hook for what's going on inside of us. And when we understand through a backward language, then we think that we can do some form of hostility or fear and produce a positive result. That's what most of the world is doing. And you look at the ancient teachings and they said, there would come a time when the whole world would be fooled. Well, we're just about there, folks. And our show today is going to address that issue. And our request of you, our invitation of you is, as James said 2,000 years ago, come out of denial, to undo the denial, and to recognize the truth about what we're doing. And when we're functioning out of hostility or fear, the destructiveness that we're creating in our world. And so our commitment is to eradicate war on planet Earth. And how do you do that? How do you eradicate war when it's so prevalent and been around for so long? Well, I'd offer my thesis on war. The reason why men do war is because they live in denial, they dissociate from the pain, and whenever they're in pain, they've always got somebody else to blame. It's always somebody else's fault. And that's the whole belief, basically, of the culture. And so what we're going to invite you to do today is, if in our discussion or anywhere in your world some form of hostility or fear comes up in you, we're going to invite you to be willing to forgive. That is, to remove that hostility or fear. That's the act of forgiving. So forgiveness, we're going to offer an ancient definition You know, Karl Marx says if you want to destroy a culture, all you need to do is change the meaning of its words. When they change the meaning of the word forgive to pardon, let somebody else off the hook for what's going on inside of you, instead of the tool with which you go inside yourself and remove your hostility and fear, forgiveness was disappeared from the planet. That's how brilliant Karl Marx was, to recognize that if you change the meaning of a word, then you remove from the culture whatever that word represents. And when you slide something else back in place, people think when they say, I forgive you, I forgive myself, that they're actually forgiving. And my offering to you is that has nothing whatsoever to do with forgiveness. It's called pardoning. Nice thing to do, let somebody off the hook. But once you've pardoned someone, if you choose to do that, then the real work begins when you actually engage in forgiveness. And that is that you own what's happening inside of you, and you choose to remove that which causes you pain, that which leads to your hostility and fear, so that you approach every event in your life, every situation in your life, out of the active presence of love. If you come from a bloodline that has always lived in the hallucination of hostility and fear is caused by someone else, then hostility as a skill will be something that the mind will hallucinate 1,000 reasons for. If there's a particular quality of upset, until we choose to remove that upset and return to our human lives, the mind will always find somebody or something upon which to place that hostility and somebody or something to blame. There will always be some reason that the mind will use to create that hallucination. And so what we're inviting is another level of function, and that is that of a true human life. That is that of the true active presence of love, where you can't hallucinate hostility or fear because you've removed hostility or fear. You may not like the way something is, but you don't give up your human life over it. You may step forward in a connected space of love and ask for things to change in your world, but instead of this reason to be in some sort of driving upset over an hallucination, and the way you tell if your mind is hallucinating is whenever there's hostility or fear of any kind, the mind is usually corrupt at it, and there's an hallucination. And whatever skills your bloodline has developed, you know, if it's blaming somebody else, then your mind will use that skill to find a way to blame somebody else for what you're feeling and you're experiencing. And our work here on planet Earth is to undo that dynamic, return to human life. So we're delighted that you're with us. Is Dr. Tim with us? Is David with us? And or is Sam with us today?
Sam is with us, and I have her turned on. Welcome, Sam. We're glad that you're with us.
Hello, Sam. We're glad you're here, and I would like to just introduce Sam Brotherton, who is a teacher of our work in the Springfield, Missouri area. And a couple of days ago, we got an email from Sam, or I guess it was actually a Facebook post, around an issue where there was a man who created a video where he sits out in a field and reads a letter that his daughter, who obviously is experiencing some pain and upset, is ranting on her Facebook page about how her parents mistreat her. And this gentleman, proclaiming to be a good father and wanting to support his daughter, reads her letter and warns her several times how her life is about to get much more difficult. Once you see punishment happening, you know there's hostility involved, wherever there is punishment. Now, the word switch game has struck in this instance again, because what we've been told is that we're not punishing, we're disciplining. Well, the word discipline, if you look at its roots, comes from the word disciple, and it means properly taught. It does not mean, as Karl Marx would just love to hear people define it, properly beat up. Excuse me. If you discipline a child, that is, if you properly beat them up, if you properly, out of hostility and fear, teach them what they've done that's wrong, then you've not only reinforced what they've done as quote-unquote wrong, but you've added to it your own measure of hostility and fear and driven it deeper into the bloodline. There'll come a time when the whole world has been fooled. We've been fooled, folks. Hostility and fear, destructive behavior is absolutely not a part of human life. And so Sam had replied to several posts on a television station in Springfield, Missouri, who had picked up this story of this event that happened in North Carolina, and had taken some rather severe beatings from people because she was offering that what we needed to do was to present love. And when Sam sent that notice to us, I was reminded about Ron Paul when he was in a debate in South Carolina. And South Carolina, you know, is considered to be a really shiny part of the buckle of the Bible Belt. And what Ron Paul did in one of the debates, to go look at that South Carolina debate, is he suggested following the teachings of Jesus. And when he did, the instant he did, the good folks of South Carolina booed him. We need to wake up. We've been tricked. We've been fooled. When the man named Yeshua, they call him Jesus popularly, when the healer named Yeshua spoke to people and said, "You come to me with your lips, but your hearts are far from me," he was speaking of those who mouth the words about love, but when the stress is up and the chips are down, turn to hostility and fear. So Sam took a few beatings there, and so we invited her to come on the show and share with us. So Sam, if you just kind of let us know what's happening from your bird's eye view and what's been happening the last few days. We've been doing workshops and being on the road, haven't had a chance to follow too much of it. But welcome to the show, Sam. We are absolutely delighted to have you on the team and are delighted to be here to support you. Are you there, Sam? Well, I don't know where Sam is.
I've got her turned on. Check and see if your mute button's on, Sam, because I've got you on in the switchboard.
Are you on mute, Sam? I think I hear her coming. Here she comes. Well, a little technical difficulty here. I'm not sure what's happening.
I don't either. She's still on the switchboard as being on.
Okay. Well, Jeanie, do you happen to have the letter open that this gentleman read on his video rant and that his daughter had written? Maybe that would be a way to open. And maybe, Sam, if you want to hang up and call back in. I don't know what's going on, but something kind of strange happening.
Okay. We have a lot of static there. Okay, I'm opening up the YouTube broadcast now. And the gentleman had actually put out a second reply to it. In the first one, like it's got a lot of noise coming in on your phone there. I'm going to put you on mute for a second. Okay, so on the YouTube video, and I've put it out in the chat room so people can click the link if they want and go to it, but the gentleman, his daughter, who's 15, has put something out on her Facebook page, and it's got some dissing towards her parents in it, and so he gets into her computer and comes across it, and this is his revenge to her, and a lot of people were like, yay, Dad, this is, you know, perfect discipline, and he's keeping her in line, and all of this. And Sam, I've got you clicked back on. Let's see if it works this time. Are you there?
I am here. Can you hear
awesome. Me? Yes, go for it. So I'll turn it over to you since we've got you on. So this showed up on the local Springfield radio or TV station's Facebook, right?
Yes, it was on Facebook, on Color Chin Facebook page. I saw the first post on my wall when someone posted the video of the father shooting the laptop. And if I didn't know the work that I know, that I learned from Michael, I would probably have thought, well, he showed her a lesson, didn't he? And that's what most people thought. And I was bothered that so many people thought that was okay, because I immediately saw hostility when he sat down and started the letter. I think probably the average parent would say, yeah, he's doing the right thing and he's really teaching her, and that's what seems to be the opinion of most people who wrote in and responded. Because of the work that I know and teach, I knew this was hostility, and I knew he had much deeper issues himself, and it wasn't to be judging him. I just saw that both have really a lot of pain that needed to be healed. And it's not a matter of teaching the daughter anything. It's a matter of understanding and living a life with compassion and love, and that was not what was happening in this. And I wanted to alert you and Michael about this so you could, see and understand how how the world works, but maybe we can do something about it and teach people a different way to live.
It was amazing that how many people responded back basically like you were crazy for thinking that something different could have happened. And
I think there were 174 posts on the Color 10 site, and out of the 174, I think there may have been 2 other people that said, yeah, he didn't do the right thing here. But then they didn't respond. They didn't give any opinion. They just thought it wasn't the proper way of handling it. But so I was pretty amazed that many people, in addition to the people that I had seen posts on other posts on Facebook, thought that he was right on. And that's not my opinion, and I wanted to share that to show people there's a different way of responding to situations like that, and it's a matter of looking inside and healing what's going on within each of us.
Right, exactly. And I did bring up that I would agree with you. When I first saw it, it was like people said that he wasn't angry, that he was doing it very calmly. And it's like I saw anger. I mean, he was so angry that part of the time he was talking, his voice was like quivering, and he would stutter and couldn't hardly get the words out. I mean, he was definitely angry. And, he even himself said he was an IT person. He should know that one bullet in the thing is going to kill it. It's not going to operate. So the rest of it was just extreme. I mean, it was crazy. But his letter that he wrote as an update had things in it like, and we know because of what we teach, that's your regulatory speech, that words fly up, thoughts remain below, and so he says things like, my daughter isn't hurt, she isn't emotionally scarred, she's not otherwise damaged. So saying not, how we've learned that there's focus is still on she's hurt, she's scarred, she's damaged. And and it's just amazing some of the information. There was a couple people yesterday on the show that were like, oh, let's don't focus on this, let's focus on the positive, you're adding to the negative and everything. And that's not what we're doing here. That what we are doing here is offering that there is a different way.
Well, Jeanie, I'd like to throw in some thoughts here. Am I coming through now? You
are.
Oh, good. Okay. So the first thing I'd like to say about it is that our purpose in doing this show is to invite everybody. We've been for over a year now developing a community on this radio show of people who are holding the space of love for the healing of each other. And our purpose in discussing this is to have an opportunity to show how the human mind works so that when we do something that's out of hostility or fear, we can see ourselves in a different light, because what the mind does in order to block out truth is that it calls what it's doing something other than what it is. There's an example that I use in the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Anybody who's listening can go to our website, www.whyagain.com, and download the book free. But there's a story in there where I talk about Richard, who's a character who we're doing the book with, I'm having a conversation with, and he's in a restaurant having a cup of coffee, and he spills some coffee on his plate, and when the waitress comes and takes his coffee away, what his mind sees is an old issue for him, and that is that something's being taken from him. And so he barks at her. He reaches out with hostility, but he doesn't see what he's doing for what it is. He's in blockage of truth of that. He sees it as, because of his issues, protecting himself. And so when we can start to see ourselves truly and we're functioning out of hostility or fear, we can catch ourselves and make a shift. And so my invitation is, if there's anybody who was involved in that whole conversation and thought Dad was doing a great thing, I believe that Dad was really, truly teaching his daughter. No question about it. And what he was teaching her is, if you're a big enough bully and if you've got a gun, you can take down anybody that opposes you. And I'd offer that's the mentality that leads to war. And one of our purposes in doing this work is to put an end to war, to literally become the team that changed the world by changing what we do. Now, I'll offer that it's my projection that he was angry, and it may be totally and completely my projection. However, knowing how the human mind works, what I know is this, that there is a filter system in it, and in the frontal lobes of the brain, we have intention stored. When hostility is the active filter over intentions, and this goes right into the scientific world. There's a physician named Dr. Robert Heath, who's an MD at Tulane University in Louisiana. And Dr. Heath did bone implant EEGs and came up with 3 signature frequencies for the brain, one of them being love, one of them being fear, and one of them being hostility. What Heath offered as a physician is that hostility destroys the body of the hostile, fear destroys the mind of the fearful, and love rebuilds both. Now, when the hostility filter is set over the frontal lobes of the brain, the only quality of intention that's available to the mind in that circumstance is one which is destructive. So you can deduce from that the fact that he's willing to take out a 45 caliber weapon, and he not only puts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but 8 hollow point exploding tip bullets, and he explains this to his daughter as he does this rant, that they're hollow tip exploding bullets and that she's going to pay for them at $1 a round. When you look at that destruction of property, here's a guy, and there's a saying in our culture that says, why do you cut off your nose to spite your face? Well, he explained that he had just spent $130 putting software on that laptop the day before, and that he spent a half a day working on it. So now he's destroying it, and the fact that there's destructive behavior, destruction of property, says that the filter that was active in his mind was that of destruction. Once you realize that, then you have an opportunity to start to tap into what's really going on. And what's really going on here is the hostility filter being active leads one to the behavior which is destructive, but the mind that does that calls this teaching a lesson. And for anybody that believes this is a rah-rah, yay, Dad, this is a very valuable lesson, I invite you to recognize that this is a lesson that will lead this child, when she becomes a parent, unless she does some inner healing work, to become hostile and destructive toward her child. Excuse me, folks, there's enough of it. We've done enough already on the planet. It's time for us, and it's about us learning who we are as human beings. And who we are as human beings, if you just hold a newborn, you will know precisely what that is, and that is this awesome active presence of love. And a measuring stick that we use in this work for behavior is, if you could imagine a newborn child doing the behavior, then probably it's appropriate, because it comes from that awesome active space of love. And if you can't, then it's not. And there's some healing to be done. And Sam, I appreciate having you on the team of healers that teaches this work around the globe, that creates support for people who are willing to start to see their lives differently and to change the dynamics. It's awesome to have you as part of the team to do that.
Well, I live the work every day, and years ago I would never have thought my mind would be in the space it's in, to constantly be aware of love and not only hold love for others but for myself, because I was raised in the typical kind of family with this kind of dynamic that you just saw. And so I've had to make some major shifts in my own thinking to get to the space that I could even teach this work. And once you know this work, you can't turn back, because that's all you see. You know, immediately when that man sat down, I knew he was hostile. And you've just taught me the tools to know how to get through life and not live in that hostility and fear. And I invite anyone who's listening now to join and learn how to do that, because we've got enough crazy minds in the world, and we need to get everyone back to sanity so we can hold that space of love for everyone around us, including ourselves.
Yeah, and in this work, we define an insane mind as a mind without the active presence of love, as a mind without the presence of a human life, the human life being this active presence of love. And so that's the whole purpose of what it is that we're doing, and that's our support for every mind, heart, and being on the planet.
I think that the interpretation of love that the majority of people who responded to this believed is that he was loving because he was teaching his daughter how to respect her family. You know, he thought he was teaching her the right way. And I know in his heart he loves his daughter, but he's acting out of his past issues that he's never cleared up. That's what I explained on Facebook. It goes on from generation to generation to generation. And I don't think anyone is to blame here. There's no blame to be put out there once you understand how the mind works. You just understand he's running on his stored realities, his own belief system. And he didn't do it to harm her. I know in his heart he thought he was doing the right thing. I'll show her. I'm going to teach her how to be respectful. And there's just a different way of doing that. And that, I think that's what bothered me the most about this, to think that not only did he exhibit that hostility, but he's going to teach her that that's how you act. And in essence, that's what happened, because she didn't feel safe to talk to her father. She didn't feel there was an open communication to go to him and say, you know, I feel like I'm overworked. I do so much work around here. I clean the kitchen and I vacuum. And, you know, she didn't feel safe. So she needed an outlet to vent. So she blocked her parents from Facebook and just cut loose with a letter, because that was her only way of doing it. But she had hostility in that letter, which aggravated him when he read it. So I believe that what she put out in the letter was learned behavior from him, because she's seen him do it her whole life. And the lessons go on and on and on until someone steps up to the plate and says, this is enough. We're not going to behave this way anymore. We're going to heal what's inside of us instead of looking outside of us to heal, to make the other people change.
Absolutely. And, you know, when one wants a positive result, but they haven't resolved their own internal rage and fear, then their desire for a positive result ends up with them doing rage and fear. And the alternative for this young lady, and I would offer that he has not taught her one iota of respect. I guarantee she does not respect him one little bit as a result of this behavior. And she's probably terrified of him. Yeah. Now, if you call being terrified respect, then, hey, she's learned it. But I'd offer that when she goes on and raises her kids and starts to teach them that kind of so-called respect, it's a false copy. It has nothing whatsoever to do with respect. And it's just time for us to wake up as human beings and to realize what we're doing to ourselves and to each other and to the planet. Now, the alternative I would offer in that situation would be to have a home system where a father has been properly taught, a mother has been properly taught, and a child has been properly taught. And there's responsibility communication. And so the child who's feeling overloaded, maybe, and you know, I'm one who believes that a parent is not for leaning on, but rather a parent is to make leaning on necessary. and a parent should never do for a child what the child can do for themselves. But trying to teach that lesson out of hostility is never going to produce a proper teaching or a proper result. It'll simply produce more of the same abusive behavior, the same destructive behavior. The alternative would have been a space where a daughter could go to a loving father and mother who would hold the space for her, that a mother and father would be in the space of love in themselves, to hear what the daughter had to say and to help her to understand that her hostility was inappropriate and that the hostility inside of her own mind is distorting and destroying her perception. And that there's a tool called forgiveness. And the tool called forgiveness would be the tool where this young lady would have, ideally, she would have come up as a child understanding this. And if she was in hostility, instead of being pounded back into the ground every time her hostility comes up, what would have happened was that she would have had the opportunity to go, gee, I'm pretty hostile about this. I think I need to do some forgiveness work to get out of my hostility, because my hostility is covering up my humanness. And what I want to do is live as a human being. I want to model mom and dad and live as the active presence of love like they do. And instead, she's living, obviously, the modeling that she's gotten, which is what most of the world believes. The ancient teaching said there'd come a time when the whole world would be fooled. It's time for us to get out of fooling ourselves. When we're in hostility or fear, we lose our human lives. When we heal our hostility and fear, we regain our human lives. So do we have any callers who have any thoughts for us? Jeanie, anybody calling in and have a thought for us on this topic?
Nobody has their hand up, and the chat room has got 3 people in it, so I'm not sure if everybody needs to hit refresh or what's going on. I've refreshed from my end too, but that's just a very low number for even our normal days in the chat room, so I'm not sure if the technical difficulties we had at the beginning maybe messed that up a little bit. We do have a hand that just went up.
Somebody's got a comment for us?
Area code 954, you're on the air.
Hello, my heart family. This is Nene.
Hello there, young lady. Welcome.
Thank you. At first, I wanted to remind everybody today's support group in Dania Beach at the Art Gallery. So please do go into the web and check for the address. And, we hope to see you all there.
Awesome. Thank you. Nene is the teacher of our work down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We're glad to have you on the show, Nene. So do you have any thoughts about this situation?
Well, I have a thought in general, because I've been watching DVD with Bruce Lipton, where he talked about the cells and the behavior and how the cell responds to our environment. And I thought it was very interesting that he says that the cell has a state of growth, a normal state of growth and harmony, and when it receives a signal of defensiveness, it becomes inflammatory. And I thought it was very interesting that inside our body, that intelligence of the cell, that if there is a local problem, a local signal that's identified, the cells identified locally, and they go into inflammation. But also, there's a signal that comes from the mind, which overrides the signal of the local part. So in this case, in our cases of hostility and fear, that it becomes all those diseases, I think I understand that the accumulation in your mind, if you perceive that hostility all the time, your mind is in a defensive mode. And that's why, then all the diseases from the cell start.
Well, in terms of this situation, Nene, you're right on track, because if you look at the daughter's behavior, it was very inflammatory. If you look at the father's behavior, it's very inflammatory. if you look at most of the people who are rah, this is a great way to teach a lesson, it's pretty inflammatory, and that's exactly what it creates. And to heal the inflammatory response, what is needed is something to soothe the pain, something to remove what's inflicting the damage that is producing the inflammation. And the thing that will soothe and heal that is one who's living in the active presence of love. And for me, I don't care how you cut it, if you are the active presence of love, you can't pick up a gun and use hollow-tip exploding bullets 8 times to kill a laptop. Sorry, there's no lesson in that except that if I carry the biggest stick, I get to rule the roost. And, you know, that's a mentality that's been around in our world for too long. It's time for us to do some healing. And I'm talking about all of us, that if there's some sort of hostility or fear in any mind, that mind is living in an hallucination, and it always focuses outward as though somebody else or something else is the problem. Well, I'm upset because of this, and my input is that you're never upset for the reason you think. You're never upset because of anything except that there's a quality of upset in you. Now, if you recognize that and you choose to heal your upset, then you become a human being. You become a space of healing and of life and of aliveness. And you don't create a child who's learned something by being terrorized over having her laptop destroyed. So that would be my input.
Yep.
But I think you're right on to think.
Yes, exactly. And when I heard this story, you can apply that story in larger or smaller scale. I remember before doing my work, I remember how hostile I used to break things when I was, you know, in pain in my hostility. I would break a glass, break a cup, whatever I had in my hand, whatever. And I remember that, you know, my daughter, she got that terror of me. Of course, I mean, the terror in the system went from generation to generation, and that created distance. I remember before I started my spiritual work, I would spend 2 weeks, nothing from my daughter, not a text message, not a call, not an email, nothing. And now, you know, after applying myself, and she's doing also her work, I see the sweetness and the kindness, and we show each other so much of that. I mean, have a good day, Mommy. Mom, kiss. Or she sends me, you know, just a little face or something. It's like every day. So this work, this cleaning of the internal content is the answer.
And Danae, I acknowledge you for having the courage to do the depth of work that you've done, to be able to go to your daughter and to speak these things responsibly, and in taking responsibility to change the whole dynamic. That's just so very powerful to bring healing into that situation. Is just awesome, and to be able to shift, especially after that much hostility has gone down, to be able to shift the dynamic in your relationship with your daughter and bring back human life to your interaction with each other. That's just fabulous and awesome and powerful.
Yes. Well, thank you. And okay, so I'll call tomorrow to talk a little bit about the experiences about healing this week. It's been awesome. And, we're continuing the work. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, blessings. Love you.
Bye.
Michael, I think something that's really important to point out here, as someone who may not know about the hostility and fear and how deep it can be, can you tell about how it hides in the unconscious and we're totally unaware? Because I talk to so many people who say, I'm not angry, I don't have any fear, but their actions show it every day. They are not consciously aware of it because it's hiding in the unconscious mind, so it's not right in their face, but it shows in their actions. Can you explain to people who are listening how this gentleman that shot the laptop can say, I'm not an angry person at all. Because people just don't get that.
Jeanie really brought up a powerful quote a few minutes ago where she quoted Shakespeare, where Shakespeare says, my words fly up, my thoughts remain below. That's just a way of saying I was unconscious. So when my words and my behaviors exhibit destruction, whether it's destructive words or I shoot a laptop, destructive behavior, that's telling me that my mind is in a state of hostility, that there's an unconscious dynamic. But what happens is we live in this world of denial and pretense. And the denial's been going on so long, you can go back into the ancient Aramaic physics language. And if you look in the book of James, you hear 2,000 years ago, you hear James saying, stop your denial. And then he explains what war is about. And he says, for war comes from the war within your members. Speaking of your own internal dynamics, when we're at war with ourselves, when we have that denied and dissociated hostility and fear, then we're stuck in a dynamic that simply needs to change. And it doesn't change until we choose to become conscious, until we choose to look in depth at our behaviors and own the truth of what it is that we're setting up and what we're doing. So clearly, there's a healing opportunity here, and I hold the space for everybody who would believe that this shooting of a laptop is a positive thing and a way to teach a child something, for healing of a mind that could possibly conceive of that kind of destructive behavior as teaching anything other than, well, if you're big and strong, you can destroy, and then people will learn from you. Then they'll respect you. Excuse me. There's no respect for him in that. I beg to differ with anybody. Now, she may step gingerly. She may walk on eggshells. She may never express her feelings again. But there's not respect there. Hostile behavior, destructive behavior does not produce respect. And it actually matches the very behavior that the daughter did with her hostile letter. It produces the same kind of thing. There's an interesting movie, if you want to watch, how the energetic cycles of hostility can take over lives. It's called The War of the Roses. And in The War of the Roses, you see these two people who, the Roses are a couple, who are getting a divorce. And you see how they, on a couple of occasions in the movie, they have some kind of positive thing starting to happen, and then one of them or the other uses a hostile word, and they're right back into this hostile behavior until they engage in such a downward spiral that they ultimately they kill each other. And that movie is exemplary of, I don't know what preceded. He did refer to something like this rant that his daughter did. And believe me, I offer that his daughter needs some support and some healing. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that what she did was right. She was clearly way out in space somewhere, just about as far out in space as has been modeled for her, and she doesn't have the brain cells to do it any other way. So when we can start to share the tools of forgiveness, and we can start to bring forward human life and own what is hostile and fearful in us, then we can change that dynamic in our world and in the world around us. And that's exactly why we're here, and that's exactly what our show today is about. That's what we're here to do.
I think the daughter is a prime example of things that are going on with many young people these days. There's so many suicides. There's a lot of actions that are out of hostility, and it's because they don't have anywhere to turn, and they're running on learned behavior, because this was her learned behavior. She didn't feel safe to talk about it, and so that was her, like you said, that's all she knew to do. And our young people need to know that it's safe to go to people to talk, to learn how to heal their own minds and work through things. I remember 11 years ago when I called you, I was in a blame mode, and I was blaming people around me. And I remember the wisest words I heard came from your mouth on the phone that said, well, why don't you come and heal yourself, and as you heal, those around you will heal. And my first reaction was, that's the most bizarre thing I ever heard. They're my problem, not me. They're my problem. But there was something in your voice that caused me to really trust that you knew exactly what you were doing, and you knew the exact perfect thing for me. And you said, come and heal yourself. And I came to Heartland for a 9-day intensive. And in the first 3 days I was there, I knew this was the most powerful healing work on the planet, and I knew I had to learn it. And then I returned to Heartland after being away for 2 weeks. I returned for a 52-day intensive, and then came back the following summer. And I've been through every intensive that you have, and it's totally changed my life. I'm a different person than I was, and I've always been a loving person on the outside, but not on the inside.
So perhaps you, if it's appropriate, maybe you'd share. Unless, Jeanie, do we have any callers calling in at this moment? Is your mute button on, sweetie?
There's nobody on right now.
Okay. Well, perhaps you'd share a little bit about what, if it's appropriate, what was going on in your life when that occurred. When you first came to Heartland.
A number of deaths in my life. I was raised in a double alcoholic home with a lot of anger, a lot of bigotry, racial bigotry. I had 2 murders in my family when I was 19. I came home from work and found my mother dead in bed, and then the following year my brother was murdered, and then in 1986 my sister-in-law was murdered. And then I lost my dad, and my brother had a stroke, and I had to get guardianship for my niece who had Down syndrome, who witnessed her mother being murdered. And so my husband and I weren't getting along because we had so much stress in our family. I mean, there was just I was just loaded with stress, and I didn't know what to do with it. So we were both acting out in anger because we didn't know what to do with all of these feelings. And my feelings had been suppressed for so many years because I was raised with a father who said, when my brothers called home, he said, "You did what? Well, you're no longer my son. I've totally disowned you." So I grew up with the reality that if I ever make a mistake, where will I live? Where will I function? Because my parents would disown me if I ever made a mistake. So everything had to be right. I always had to be right in every argument, every discussion, because otherwise who would I be? So what your work has taught me to do is to go in and dismantle all of these belief systems that I stored as a result of many generations of hostility and fear. So that's the beauty of this work, that you can learn how to manage the mind and get rid of what doesn't belong there. So I no longer act out of those stored belief systems because they're no longer there. Not to say I'm not triggered, because I'm triggered all the time for things, but I know how to deal with it. I know how to look inside and go, okay, Sam, what's going on? Oh, it's about this. Oh, well, that was then, and I know how to let it go.
Awesome. Yeah, you've really, in the ancient teachings, they talked about the overcoming life. To he that overcomes, there was a whole list of promises, and you have certainly earned the title of one who has overcome, and done a huge, huge amount of work, and the number of people that you're supporting and assisting in making that shift out of hostility or fear into love is pretty awesome.
Well, I love sharing it. I love teaching it. Sometimes it's quite a challenge when people want to change and they ask me about it, and I start to share it with them, and they give up. There's such resistance for people to let go of what they're holding because they have such an attachment to their own belief system. And they don't know there's another way, just as I didn't know there was another way when I called you, when you said, well, come and heal yourself, and as you heal, those around you will heal. And some did heal, some didn't heal. My husband didn't heal. He was so resistant to this work, and he saw changes in me, and he didn't want to look inside, so he ran. And I remember a story that you would read at the end of an intensive about the healing path can be a very lonely path, because as you change, those around you don't always want to change. They want to stay with their own belief system, and I've seen that happen. And it's a challenge to get through, but I'm at peace with who I am, and I know I'm on the right path in knowing how to manage my mind and working out of a state of love. And I commend you for putting this work out there and for teaching me this work, because it's changed my life, and many lives around me have changed because of my teaching this work. So I thank you for that, Michael.
Michael, I think your mute's on now.
What did you say, Jeanie?
I said I think Michael's got his mute on. If you're trying to talk, we cannot hear you, Michael.
You're right. Okay, excuse me. Yeah, I was just saying that the awesome amount of work that you've done is just so powerful, and I was giving out the number 646-200-4169, and if you're on the line and you have a question, just push 1. That will put your hand up in the control panel, and Jeanie will open for your question, your comment. How do you approach? What do you do about a situation like this? And we'd love to hear your thoughts or your comments. 646-200-4169. So, Jeanie, do we have any callers? Anything happening in the chat room?
No, there's, two hands just went up at the exact same time. So first one is area code 336. You're on the air.
Hello, it's Paula in Greensboro. How are you?
Well, welcome, young lady. We are well. How are you?
Great. And, this whole story, with the father doing what he did has been bothering me greatly. And I don't know, let's see, I want to make a couple of comments. One is, the child, the young girl, it's pretty obvious she didn't have a safe enough space to just walk up to her parents and say, I'm not feeling appreciated, or I feel like I'm doing a big share of my work around here, and I'm not sure that you guys even notice or appreciate it. That would just be a very simple way to walk in a room and have a great conversation. But she couldn't do that, and most of us didn't grow up, and I certainly didn't grow up in a family that I could have done that either. It's what I've had to learn as an adult raising my own child, that if I wanted him to be able to speak to me, I didn't want him to fear me. And one of the things about us as parents or humans, when we're quick to tell a young person that we're in charge of, don't do that, or no, don't do that. But we forget there's a second step that's really valuable, which is, instead, this is what I would like you to do, like modeling what it is that you just said don't do, but what is it you want me to do? I think that's missing a lot in our communication with children in particular. And then the second piece for building respect is it starts at even when they start verbalizing and being able to say, I want to hear what you have to say. I mean, to a 2-year-old, that may sound weird, but, a 2-year-old has something to say, and to be able to listen to what they have to say doesn't mean you're going to grant them whatever it is they're telling you they want. I think some parents would be scared about what I'm saying, because I'm not saying just because you hear them and acknowledge you've heard them, you respect what you heard out of them, then you're still going to have to say, well, no, I can't give you your every desire. I have to say no to that. But thank you for sharing anyway. I mean, it's like having an adult conversation, even though you're talking to a 2-year-old. That's where the respect begins, way back there, not, later in life when they're fully developed and can speak full sentences. I mean, you really are doing that when they're young. And the other piece is acknowledging the emotions that a child feels. I mean, I didn't even know what feelings I had until I was in my 30s and was participating in coursework. And I was stunned when people would go around the room and say what they felt about certain things, and I would freeze because I didn't know what I felt about anything. I didn't know what the words were that went with what I felt. So honoring people's emotions and help children name what they are, like, oh, that you must be angry, or you must be frustrated, or, maybe you're grieving over the loss of that favorite toy of yours. How else are they going to learn what all that stuff is and learn that it's okay to say, I'm feeling all this? I think that's where it all comes from. Now, we got a big job ahead of us to teach everybody in the world how to talk with each other like this.
Well, that's the task that we're about, is to bring these tools to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. And of course, it's all projection for this young lady to not feel appreciated. And she was probably brought up in a world where she was taught not to appreciate herself. So her projection is, nobody appreciates me. And if one lives in a world where they hold a reality such as nobody appreciates me, somebody could say thank you, smile, be loving, gentle, respectful, supportive, and nurturing. But one who says I get abused and I don't get respect ends up not even being able to receive. It's like there's no antenna, there's no receiver for respect, because one has no respect of self. And so the starting point for a young lady who's not feeling respected by those around her, and of course it's Dad's issue too, because his whole thing is he wants respect, and very likely it's been genetically passed on, that not respecting himself and her not respecting herself, that each one could use some forgiveness for their self-deprecating ideas, to remove the self-deprecating ideas and get back to a space of connected love, so that there is self-appreciation. And most often what we're accusing somebody else of doing to us is what we've been doing to ourselves, but we deny and dissociate from. And so it's all an unconscious dynamic. And so when you bring that dynamic forward and make it conscious, all of a sudden everything changes. And that's what we're looking to do, is to create those changes with this work.
Right. Well, thank you.
Thank you for your call, and I think we've got one more caller. We've got maybe a minute left. Jeanie?
We do, and it's area code 517. You're on the air.
Welcome.
Good afternoon.
About a minute.
Yep, we've got a minute, so I'll be real brief. Wonderful program. I appreciate all the things that have been said. The piece I just heard about how we can listen and talk with our children. I think it's a great example with how we have the opportunity to listen and talk with everyone. Because from my observation, a lot of us are little children running around in adult bodies. And so that was one piece that I got. And also, Michael, the whole idea of the gentleman and the young lady is so important. I loved the conversation because it's so important to give voice to what these experiences are we're having. And the overriding message that he was sending, along with all the other stuff, was what you have to say is not valuable. And that's one of the main pieces that I see in my own private work and in my classes and such, that most of us feel that we don't have value. And it isn't the truth. It's just an absolute lie. So thank you. And I'll let you wrap up because we're getting close to the end.
Self-deprecation is a big one, and Renee is going to call in first thing tomorrow and share with us a major healing crisis she's been through, which will be a great kickoff for continuing this conversation. So maybe after Renee finishes, Dr. Space, you call back in. We're not going to do our outro today. We're down to about 8 seconds, and so we'll just say thank you. We're in Tampa tonight. We'll be in Holiday, Florida in about 2 weeks. We'll be in Ocala next week. So come and play with us. Have the best year yet of your term. We're not going to do our outro today. We're down to about 8 seconds, and so we'll just say thank you. We're in Tampa tonight. We'll be in Holiday, Florida in about 2 weeks. We'll be in Ocala next week. So come and play with us. Have the best year yet.